this meeting in August 2015, the National Enquirer guy, as we'll call him, agreed to help with Trump's campaign, saying that he would act as eyes and ears for the campaign by looking out for negative stories about Trump and alerting Michael Cohen before those stories were published. The National Enquirer guy also agreed to publish negative stories about Trump's competitors for the election. So that's what prosecutors spelled out today in the statement of facts about this August 2015 meeting where the scheme was hatched. What they say to the court in this statement of facts is that the scheme paid off first with a story we had all forgotten. It paid off first with a Trump Tower doorman who was making allegations, apparently, that Trump had fathered a child out of wedlock. Now, according to prosecutors today, the National Enquirer company paid this doorman $30,000 to keep quiet about that allegation, without even investigating if it was true. They just paid him $30,000, regardless of whether it was true, in order to keep his mouth shut ahead of the election. Interestingly, prosecutors then go out of their way later in the statement of facts to tell the court that the company eventually did investigate the story and decided that it wasn't, in fact, true. I feel like reading it, it was nice of them to put that in there in terms of Donald Trump's reputation. But that doesn't change the fact that as part of this alleged scheme to catch and kill negative stories about Trump ahead of the election, the company did, in fact, pay this guy off to the tune of $30,000 to keep him quiet so as to help Trump's chances in the election. Prosecutors also said today that the company, the National Enquirer company, also booked that payment to the doorman in their financial records in such a way that was false and illegal. That ends up being important in just a moment. According to prosecutors, though, the scheme, the catch and kill scheme hatched between the guy whose name I'm embarrassed to say and Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, that scheme paid off first with the doorman story. It paid off next for Trump with the National Enquirer company making another payment to keep another story quiet that might have hurt Trump in the election. In the second instance, it was a $150,000 payment to this woman whose name is Karen McDougal. In both of those instances, prosecutor Alvin Bragg said today that the bookkeeping around those payments, the payment to the doorman, the payment to Karen McDougal, resulted in false business statements being made on the books of the parent company that owns the National Enquirer. Now, that ends up being important to all of our understanding here, to the eventual fate of Donald Trump, because that factor ends up being important to the crimes, the alleged crimes being charged against Trump as felonies. The contention from prosecutors today, which we did not know was coming in this exact way, the contention from prosecutors today is that this overall scheme was a violation of New York election law, because New York election law makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. And what prosecutors said today is that part of the unlawful means alleged here is that this company paid off all these people with weird sex stories about Donald Trump and then recorded it in their business records like they were buying Post-it notes or something. They're saying that was a crime. That's why this was an overall criminal scheme under New York law. That's why these false business records that Trump oversaw and insisted upon can be charged as felonies. That's why, at least theoretically, he should be facing jail time. But back to the scheme. First, we had the payoff to keep the doorman quiet. Then we had the payoff to keep Karen McDougal quiet. Prosecutors said there was then one more person they paid to keep quiet. And that, of course, was Stormy Daniels, America's sweetheart. As prosecutors laid it out, by this point in the scheme, the National Enquirer company was getting sick of throwing money down this filthy well. So when it came time in the last few days before the election to pay off yet another person to keep quiet with a weird sex story about Donald Trump, the presidential candidate, Mr. Trump himself, and his own supposed business, they were left to take care of the money this time on their own without that much help from the National Enquirer. And that's where we got the Stormy Daniels payment. And that's where we got a deeply stupid Rube Goldberg scheme that was supposed to make it seem like they were doing something other than paying Stormy Daniels to keep quiet before the election. But anybody who looked at it for more than 10 seconds could tell that's what they were doing. And that is where we got the enumerated receipts today for 34 different allegedly false business records, including the additional aggravating factor, which is the detailed summary of how they structured the Stormy Daniels reimbursement payments to Michael Cohen to look like something other than reimbursement payments, so they could deceive and therefore cheat the tax man while also committing this other crime. And the deceit of the taxman, the alleged tax-purposed restructuring of these payments, is again, as described by prosecutors, one of the attempted crimes that prosecutors need to be able to point to. So all of this can be charged as a felony instead of just as a misdemeanor. One last point here, just to nut this up, from the arraignment today, here's how the lead prosecutor laid it out to the judge, basically to kick off the arraignment today after Trump pled not guilty. He says this: the defendant, Donald J. Trump, falsified New York business records in order to conceal an illegal conspiracy to undermine the integrity of the 2016 presidential election and other violations of election laws. Beginning in about August 2015, the defendant agreed with others to carry out an unlawful plan to identify and suppress negative information that could have undermined his candidacy for president. As part of that plan, a lawyer employed by the Trump Organization made a covert and illegal $130,000 payment at the defendant's direction. The purpose of the payment was to avoid negative attention to the defendant's campaign by suppressing information about an allegedly sexual encounter between defendant and an adult film actress. After the election, defendant reimbursed the lawyer through a series of disguised monthly payments that hid the true nature of the payoff by causing a series of false business records in the records of the Trump Organization here in Manhattan, and even mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payment. Defendant falsified these New York business records with the intent to defraud, including the intent to commit another crime and to aid and conceal the commission of another crime. This office, he said, has long prioritized protecting the integrity of business records maintained here in New York. When those records are falsified in service of another crime, it's a felony. That's what this defendant did when he falsified business records in order to conceal unlawful efforts to promote his candidacy. And that's why we are here.